begin now. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. My name is Margaret Ziegler. I am the ICA representative in the United States of America, and welcome to the Organization of American States building, the OAS building, and to this event, Scaling Sustainable Agricultural Productivity Growth in Latin America and the Caribbean. We welcome you, and this partnership between ICA, Virginia Tech College of Agriculture and Life Sciences GAP Initiative, and Fontagro, which is a unique sustainable co-financing mechanism for the development of agricultural technology across the Americas, welcomes you. This is a special partnership event, and as partners, we work together and focus on sustainable agriculture, productivity, and food security throughout the Americas and the world. We aim to improve the lives of farmers, consumers, and to conserve the natural resource base. We are pleased to welcome you today here in the room. We have a number of leaders from the private sector, the public sector, the Organization of American States, many of you online. We have a rainy day in Washington, so I know that many people are participating with this event. We have respondents from Bolivia, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Brazil, and embassy attachés who have responded from Italy, Australia, and many others. Apologies if I've missed any of you, but thank you for coming, and thank you for those online. Thank you also to ICA for helping to coordinate this event in our headquarters in Costa Rica. We're transmitting this through Spanish and English networks, and the events will be able to be viewed afterwards on our social media channels on YouTube and on Facebook in English and Spanish. So today we're here to learn more about the findings of this report, the 2023 GAP report, Every Farmer, Every Tool. This particular report has a strong focus on Latin America and the Caribbean. ICA has been a partner in the GAP initiative since 2012. We work to bring the findings of the GAP report and share those contributions from the Americas each year. We also help to translate the report into Spanish. We know it's important for readers and consumers of the report to see the report in their own language. We aim to increase the readership by translating this in the future also to Portuguese. Today we're going to hear from a number of speakers and experts on the topic of sustainable agriculture and productivity in agriculture and why it's so important. The GAP report contains stories from Argentina to Zambia and many countries in between. The regional section of the GAP report mentions Argentina, Dominican Republic, Panama, Chile, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Peru, and many others across the Caribbean. In the room, you'll find the report and a link and QR codes to access it in Spanish and English. Our opening remarks today include remarks from the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Dr. Alan Grant of Virginia Tech. Later, we will hear from Dr. Tom Thompson, who will present the findings of the report. We'll then have a fireside chat with partners of the GAP initiative and hear perspectives also later from Dr. Edward Brezhnian of the World Bank and Dr. Juan Cruz Molina of Fontagro and Argentina. We will not be able to take questions from the online audience, but we will have time for questions and answers in the room, facilitated by Dr. Horace Friasa of ICA. Now I will invite Dean Alan Grant to say a few words. Dean Grant became the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Virginia Tech, Virginia Polytech Institute, in October 2009. Virginia Tech, through its research, teaching, and extension missions at the College of Agriculture and Life Science, has the goal to serve the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia and beyond by enhancing the vitality and sustainability of agriculture. Dean Grant has been a champion of the GAP initiative and the GAP report. Now please share with us, Dean Grant, online, some of your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Margaret. Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to welcome you and to share a few comments with you about the GAP report, the Global Agricultural Productivity Report. Virginia Tech has really enjoyed serving as the host of the GAP report for several years now, and we were delighted to launch our first report in 2019, and we are excited to join you today to help co-host today's event, along with ICA and Fontagro, to share the 2023 GAP report entitled Every Farmer, Every Tool. We've really appreciated the partnership and valued the partnership with ICA and Fontagro. And of course, as Margaret mentioned, they've been extremely helpful in translating the GAP report as well. On behalf of my colleagues at Virginia Tech, many thanks to the GAP report's supporting partners for making this possible and for their significant ongoing support. And we also thank the GAP report's technical partners for their important contributions to the partnership. Along with the impressive quality and reach of the report, it was the opportunity to partner with these member companies and firms that was and organizations that was a major attraction for Virginia Tech's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences to serve as a host university for the GAP initiative and the GAP report. The challenges of increasing agricultural productivity in the coming decades will require new skill sets, global perspectives, innovative approaches, and the GAP report creates a platform to address these challenges and to work together to realize our collective vision of promoting sustainable and productive agriculture and food systems. And we believe that Virginia Tech and other institutions and organizations in the GAP report make a great partnership to address these challenges. And as a major land grant university, we're seeing that the GAP report is also enhancing global learning and engagement and helping students serve globally, our future leaders, to enrich communities at home and abroad, and to develop partnerships that address some of the most challenging issues faced by society. So again, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I welcome you to the event, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dean Grant. Thank you very much. Now we're going to turn to the actual findings of the GAP report. To present those findings, we have Dr. Thomas, but he goes by Tom. He is the Associate Dean and Director of the College of Agriculture and Life Science Global at Virginia Tech. CALS Global builds partnerships, drives thought leadership, and creates opportunities for students and faculty to serve and participate globally. He holds master's and doctoral degrees in agronomy and soil science. Dr. Thompson is also a professor of agronomy. His recent research and outreach have focused on the adoption of conservation agriculture in smallholder farming systems. He's been the executive producer of the Global Agricultural Productivity Report, GAP report, since 2019. Now I invite you, Dr. Thompson, to please share with us the findings of the report.
Thank you very much, Margaret, and thank you, Dean Grant, for your comments. And like Dean Grant, I want to welcome everyone to this webinar event. We're very pleased to be presenting this in collaboration with our friends and partners at ICA and Fontagro. I will now share my screen. And if I could please get some indication, Margaret or others?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Screen?
Mhm.
Okay, very good. Very good. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm pleased to present some of the results from the 2023 GAP report, Every Farmer, Every Tool. At the very end of my presentation, I will also give you a sneak preview of the 2024 GAP report, which will be released 2 weeks from today at a blended event in Washington and online. The Global Agricultural Productivity Report, or GAP report, is an annual report that uses global agricultural productivity data that is curated by the United States Department of Agriculture to analyze global, regional, and national trends in agricultural productivity growth. We interpret these trends, provide high-level solutions, and our partners, including ICA and Fontagro, help us to illustrate the benefits of agricultural productivity growth around the world. The GAP report is the heart of the GAP initiative at Virginia Tech. The GAP initiative educates, advocates, collaborates, and motivates action and investment to drive sustainable agricultural productivity growth. The GAP report would not be possible without the substantial efforts and contributions of our many partners. Our supporting partners provide financial support and offer perspectives on critical issues facing the world's agricultural systems. The GAP initiative supporting partners are Corteva Agroscience, John Deere, the Mosaic Company, and Smithfield Foods, and the Virginia Tech College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. The GAP report supporting partner is Bayer Crop Science. Our technical partners provide insights on areas that are essential for productivity growth, such as agricultural research and development and extension systems, natural resource management and conservation, human nutrition and animal health, community-led development, gender equity, youth inclusion, trade, and climate impacts. Virginia Tech's motto is Ut Prosum, that I may serve. We have a global mission at Virginia Tech, and we are always seeking new partners for the GAP initiative and our other initiatives that address the world's most pressing and urgent challenges. The theme for the 2023 GAP report, as you have heard, is Every Farmer, Every Tool. The title eloquently captures our vision that every farmer will have access to every proven and appropriate tool for sustainably increasing agricultural productivity. Let's define what we mean by agricultural productivity. Simply put, agricultural productivity is a measure of how efficiently inputs and resources in agriculture are converted to outputs. Agricultural productivity growth is measured as total factor productivity, or TFP. TFP increases when producers increase their output of crops, livestock, and aquaculture products using the same amount or less land, labor, capital, fertilizer, feed, and livestock. It's important to remember that productivity is not the same as production, nor is it the same as yield. Productivity, TFP, is essentially a measure of efficiency in agriculture. TFP rises when producers use innovative agricultural technologies to increase output with the same or fewer resources and inputs. Since TFP incorporates a range of inputs and outputs in its calculation, it is the broadest available measure of technical efficiency and productivity growth over time. Therefore, tracking the changes in TFP reveals a great deal about agricultural systems. First, an increase in TFP shows that a large and increasing number of producers are adopting new technologies and practices. Second, TFP growth makes the agriculture sector, including producers, more competitive by lowering production costs. A 1% increase in productivity growth, for example, is equivalent to a 1% decrease in the cost of producing, storing, and selling one unit of a particular product. And third, an increase in TFP generated by the more efficient use of inputs and resources reflects progress toward a more sustainable approach to agricultural production. At the GAP initiative, we believe that a focus on increasing total factor productivity, or TFP, in agriculture is the best pathway toward sustainable agriculture. To appreciate the role of TFP growth in agricultural systems, it's helpful to compare agricultural output and input use over time. Since 1961, global agricultural output, the output of crops, livestock, and aquaculture products, has increased fourfold, while input use has slightly more than doubled. The distance between the two lines on this graph reflects the output that can be attributed to the increasingly efficient use of agricultural inputs and resources. And some of these have a substantial environmental impact: land use, fertilizer use, and livestock use. In other words, what this graph shows is TFP growth, efficiency growth in agriculture. Comparing agricultural input to output use over time demonstrates the essential role of TFP growth in the sustainability of agricultural systems. In contrast to the global trends shown here, low-income country agricultural output growth, which has grown more than 400% since 1961, has relied largely on increasing inputs, especially expansion into new agricultural lands, which is arguably the least sustainable way to increase agricultural output. When the GAP report was first published in 2010, the GAP index was established to track changes in TFP growth and to illustrate the future growth necessary, holding inputs constant, to sustainably fulfill global needs for agricultural products by 2050. The GAP index target, which was a projected rate of 1.73% average annual TFP growth between 2010 and 2050, that's the solid green line on this graph, was based on the assumption that agricultural outputs would need to double between 2010 and 2050 to support a projected population of 10 billion people in 2050. The latest population estimates for the year 2050 from the United Nations is slightly lower, 9.7 billion persons. Nevertheless, we conclude that the need to double agricultural output from 2010 to 2050 is still valid. However, at only 1.14%, the global average annual TFP growth during 2011 to 2021, the orange line on this graph, fell well below the 1.73% annual GAP index target. For comparison, global TFP growth averaged 1.93% annually during 2001 to 2010. The current trend, which is much lower, if we extrapolate it through 2050, that's the orange dashed line, shows that we are on track to fall far below the TFP growth needed to sustainably supply demand for agricultural products. Because of the lagging TFP growth of recent years, we need to now revise the GAP index target upward to 1.9% average annual TFP growth from 2022 to 2050, the dotted green line, to achieve sustainable production of global agricultural needs by 2050. Therefore, we now have a steeper hill to climb. And if TFP growth continues to lag, the gap will further widen, making it increasingly difficult to close. Agricultural output can be increased in several ways. First, by increasing the amount of land in agriculture through conversion of grasslands, forests, and wetlands to agricultural production. Throughout most of human history, land expansion has driven agricultural output increases. We can also extend irrigation to cultivated lands or intensify the use of inputs, such as fertilizers, to increase agricultural output. Each of these strategies can be appropriate in given situations. However, increasing total factor productivity holds out hope of a more sustainable way to increase agricultural output. Input intensification, such as the increased application of fertilizers and crop protection products, increasing use of mechanization, was the most important driver of increased agricultural output during the 1960s and 70s. That's the orange part of the bars on this chart. However, beginning in the 1980s, TFP growth, the green on the graph, became the leading contributor to agricultural output growth until the present day. During the 1990s, global TFP growth averaged 1.68% annually, which increased to 1.91% annually during the first decade of the 21st century. Unfortunately, as previously mentioned, during 2011 to 2021, average annual TFP growth fell to only 1.14%, marking the end of 2 decades of robust TFP growth and falling well below the GAP index target. Compared to the 2001 to 2010 period, TFP growth declined by an average of 43% across country income groups during 2011 to 2021. The previously robust TFP growth of middle income countries declined sharply and was well below the new target growth rate of 1.91%. TFP growth in upper middle income countries declined by more than 50% between 2001 to 2010 and 2011 to 21. Low-income country TFP growth continues to lag as reported in the 2022 GAP report. Low TFP growth suggests that both the pace of innovation and the adoption of agricultural innovations are declining. This trend is especially alarming considering the agricultural production challenges of the coming years. This contraction in TFP growth may exacerbate already high levels of food insecurity and malnutrition and threaten the prospects for agriculture-led economic growth in many nations. During 2011 to 21, South Asia and China were the only world regions that experienced strong TFP growth. Strong TFP growth in South Asia at 2.18% annually was led by India and Pakistan. Within the South Asia region, only Bangladesh suffered from TFP contraction. Increasing TFP in South Asia has been linked to technological change, including technology adoption, mechanization, labor reallocation from agriculture, and adoption of information and communications technology to disseminate agriculture-related information. Strong TFP growth in China has been driven by mechanization and policies aimed at reversing unsustainable input intensification practices. Chinese government investments in agricultural research and development have no doubt played a role as well. China now spends more than twice as much on public agricultural research and development as does the United States. In the Southeast Asia and Pacific region, TFP growth averaged 3% annually during 2001 to 2010, but fell sharply to only 1.1% during 2011 to 2021. Land conversion to agriculture, led by Indonesia and Laos, was the largest contributor to agricultural output growth in the region. In sub-Saharan Africa, lagging TFP growth can be attributed to various factors, including the lack of technological change, low expenditures on agricultural research and development, weak extension systems, and climate change impacts, which appear to be most severe in tropical regions. With constrained access to productivity-enhancing tools such as mechanization, advanced seeds, fertilizer, and improved livestock breeds and feed, farmers in sub-Saharan Africa are expanding agriculture into wildlands at an alarming rate, with negative impacts on biodiversity. In sub-Saharan Africa, the conversion of lands to agricultural production was the highest seen since the 1980s, and average TFP growth was the lowest observed since the 70s. During 2011 to 21, almost 100 million hectares of land were converted to agricultural use across sub-Saharan Africa. Average TFP growth in the United States has dropped markedly as well, from 1.49% annually during the 1990s, 1.39% during the 2000s, to negative during 2011 to 2021. According to the United States Department of Agriculture Economic Research Service, in 2019, U.S. public agricultural research and development expenditures in constant dollars reached their lowest level since 1970. Without a doubt, agricultural TFP growth must be revitalized in the United States. As mentioned previously, the 2023 GAP report included a regional spotlight featuring Latin America and the Caribbean. This region has been one of the largest net food exporters globally, and in the decade up to 2015 was an outperforming region in terms of poverty and malnutrition reduction. Major climatic and economic challenges such as rising input prices, constrained ability to participate in global markets, and crop devastation resulting from droughts has recently impacted the region. This has resulted in an increasing number of people who are unable to afford a nutritious diet and growing sustainability concerns around agriculture. During the 1960s and 70s, land newly converted to agricultural production was the major driver of agricultural output growth in the Latin America and Caribbean region. However, TFP growth was the second largest contributor during this period. Land expansion and intensification of input use tapered off during the 1980s, and intensification of input use was the largest contributor to output growth. During the 90s and 2000s, TFP growth was robust in the region, led by technological change that contributed the most to output growth. However, during 2011 to 2021, average TFP growth in the region decreased to only 0.7% annually, an almost 70% decline compared to the previous decade. Currently, in the region, producers are once again relying primarily on input intensification to increase output, applying more inputs such as labor, fertilizer, and capital per hectare of land. Agricultural output growth in Latin America and the Caribbean also decreased significantly during the most recent period compared to the prior decade, to its lowest decadal value since before 1961, with output growth at only 2% annually. The regions within Latin America and the Caribbean that experienced strong TFP growth during 2001-2010 suffered serious growth declines during 2011 to 2021, including Central America, where average TFP growth declined from 1.6% annually to 1% annually. Similar declines occurred in Andean countries, that is Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, where average TFP growth fell from 2% annually to 0.8%. Brazil experienced a strong 3.8% average annual TFP growth during 2001 to 2010, but this fell by more than half to 1.53% annually during 2011 to 2021. During this same period, annual TFP growth in Mexico was 1.32%, the second highest rate in the region after Brazil. During 2011 to 2021, fertilizer consumption increased by almost 4% annually across Central American countries. This, of course, is an example of input intensification, which was at an average of 2.46% annual increase. Input intensification was especially important in Mexico as a means of increasing output. During 2011 to 2021, for example, fertilizer and livestock feed use by Mexican producers increased annually by an average of 2.2 and 3.4%, respectively. In sharp contrast to moderate TFP growth in Brazil and Mexico, Haiti suffered from shrinking TFP and a 2.5% loss of agricultural output during 2011 to 2021. Serious and ongoing civil and political unrest resulting in the abandonment of agricultural land, extreme weather events such as droughts and floods, and little to no infrastructure for irrigation or transportation have contributed to the troubling state of the Haitian agricultural sector, detrimentally affecting its predominantly agrarian population. The Latin America and Caribbean region, and indeed the world, benefited from strong TFP growth during the decades of the 1990s and the 2000s. The sharp decrease in TFP growth recently emphasizes the need for commitment to strengthen the enabling environment for productivity-enhancing tools to be developed and adopted. We need to reduce barriers to adopting these tools and find opportunities to reduce the impact of external shocks and forces to make innovations available to producers at all scales of agriculture. So here are the key findings from the 2023 GAP report. Key message 1, sustainable agricultural productivity growth is the single most effective solution to meeting demand for agricultural products while also meeting our environmental goals. Key message 2, TFP growth continues to be strong in China and South Asia, but is well below targets throughout most of the world. Sub-Saharan Africa and the United States currently show especially low TFP growth. Key message 3, during 2011 to 2021, global TFP grew at an average of just 1.14% annually. And to sustainably meet the agricultural needs of the global population by 2050, we must now aim for 1.9% annual TFP growth. Key message 4, if producers at all scales of production are able to access proven, appropriate, productivity-enhancing tools, including technologies and practices, we can make strides in closing the TFP growth gap. The 2023 GAP report executive summary includes inspiring stories from our partners, including ICA, who are doing this work around the world. And I encourage you to check these out in the 2023 GAP report. Key message 5, lack of TFP growth creates reliance on input intensification and land expansion to grow agricultural output. This may result in over-reliance on unsustainable production practices and continued decline in TFP growth. And the final key message is that collaboration between the public, private, and civil sectors is critical for tackling barriers for every farmer having access to every tool. The data you have just seen should make this clear. We must take urgent and vigorous action to accelerate productivity growth around the world, including the Latin America and Caribbean region. Only then can we be assured that our agricultural systems are sustainable and resilient to shocks. So how do we accelerate productivity growth? At the GAP report, we advocate for several policy and investment priorities to achieve sustainable agricultural productivity growth. These include investing in public agricultural research and development and extension systems. Second, embracing science-based and information technologies and expanding access for producers at all scales of production. Third, improving infrastructure and market access to strengthen value chains. Fourth, expanding partnerships to support food and nutrition security. Fifth, expanding and rationalizing regional and global trade. We must ensure that agricultural productivity gains can reach a growing population of consumers and that non-science-based food regulations do not disrupt the distribution of nutritionally valuable foods. And finally, reducing food loss and waste. The GAP report is published annually, as I told you before. And I'm very pleased to remind you that because of our partnership with ICA and Fontagro, the executive summaries of both the 2022 and 2023 GAP reports are available in Spanish on our website at globalagriculturalproductivity.org. You can also use this QR code to access the Spanish version. Finally, I'd like to encourage you to participate in the launch of the 2024 GAP report. This is the cover of the report, which will be released in 2 weeks. I believe this is the first audience to have seen the cover of the new report. It's called Powering Productivity, Scaling High-Impact Bundles of Proven and Emerging Tools. I think you'll find it to be very interesting, and I encourage you to attend. You can use this QR code to register for either the in-person portion of the launch at the National Press Club on October 3rd from 7:30 to 11 in the morning. And you can register online to attend from 8 to 11 that morning. So we'd love to have you in attendance, and thank you very much for your attention. I will stop sharing here.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. We really appreciate that, and I'm excited. That looks like a great event coming up. So the trends you talked about are troubling. This really a general decline in productivity growth, and we really need to dig a little more deeply into what is causing that and talk about that. We're going to have a fireside chat now with several of us here in the room. Afterwards, we will hear some responses and ideas from our online partners at the World Bank and Fontagro. To lead this fireside chat, we have Dr. Jessica Agnew here with us in the room. Jess is the Associate Director of the COWS Global in the College of Agriculture Life Sciences at Virginia Tech. She's been working internationally for 10 years, building interdisciplinary expertise spanning across agricultural economics, nutrition, and behavior change. She will introduce the fireside chat panel. After the fireside chat, the question and answers will be moderated by Dr. Friasa Horace, the Agricultural Health and Food Safety Specialist of ICA. I believe we have just a few minutes. We're on time. If there are any questions before we transition to the fireside chat, if anyone has any questions about the first part of the presentation, we would be happy to answer 1 or 2 questions. I think Tom Thompson is still with us. So if there is a question from the room about any aspect of the presentation that Tom made, we're happy to answer those questions now. Yes, I see one question from Valeria Pinheiro of IFPRI.
Hi, Maria. Thank you very much for this, and thank you so much for the presentation. Tom. I have one quick question, and it is that in your presentation you have Mexico and Central America all together in some of the components. Do you see a big difference in how they are behaving in terms of investment in those countries? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I will have to I'll have to look into that more thoroughly. I don't have that right on the tip of my fingers, but you're talking about investment in agricultural research and development. Is that?
Well, in some of the figures, you have Mexico and Central America and the Caribbean separate in two, but in some of the figures, you have them together. So I'm just wondering if you have some more details into that.
Well, I can tell you that in general, TFP growth recently at least has been more robust in Mexico than in the Central American countries. Let me go back to that that chart. You can see the TFP growth, or I'm sorry, you can't see it, but TFP growth in Mexico has been almost twice in the past, the most recent 10-year period has been almost twice what it is in Central America and the Caribbean. I have not separated Central America and the Caribbean, and nevertheless could do that if you'd like me to give you more information on that. Margaret can pass that on to me, and I'd be glad to respond to that after the webinar.
Okay, any other question? I don't know if Horace, if you had a question.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the excellent presentation, Dr. Thompson. It was a pleasure to see that amount of information delivered in such a short time. So I wonder if you would like to elaborate a bit more on factors affecting lower TFP growth in the US and Africa. I believe they are quite different, almost separate from each other. If you want to elaborate a bit more, I think we would be pleased. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. So in the U.S., I think that the lagging public agricultural expenditures on research and development certainly play a part in that. As you look at, what really drives TFP growth is the development and adoption, widespread adoption of agricultural innovations. There's many things that contribute to that. First of all, investments in producing those innovations. Now, obviously, private investment in agricultural research and development is important, but I think we can see from history that it's public agricultural R&D spending that's really the engine that develops a lot of that basic knowledge and basic information that can then help drive public investment. Private investment. So that lag or that lower investment by the U.S. government in ag R&D, I think is a big part of it. Certainly, another part of that is that agriculture in the U.S. and of course in certain parts of Latin America and the Caribbean is quite advanced, and so we are not seeing productivity gains, the kind of productivity gains we used to see from certain kinds of innovations. And so, but the need for continued innovation really never stops. If we want to grow TFP, if we want to grow efficiency in agriculture, we have to continue to produce those new innovations and then find ways to increase their adoption. So I think that's where we're falling down in the U.S. In sub-Saharan Africa, in much of the continent, the challenges to adopting agricultural innovations are just so high that TFP growth lags. For example, in much of sub-Saharan Africa, even what we think of as relatively simple innovations, such as improved seeds, hybrids, genetically modified organisms, which can increase efficiency or TFP, are still a long way from widespread adoption. So I hope I addressed your question.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was good to see that even though the US and other parts of the America are quite advanced, the idea that we can reach a ceiling is not exactly there. If we keep investing in innovation, in technology, we can move this ceiling much further. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Horace and Valeria, for your questions. Okay, I'll turn it over now to Jessica Agnew. Please go ahead and lead our fireside chat.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone in the room and online. It's my privilege to be here this morning and moderate this great group of people that have become friends in our partnership through the GAP initiative. So in addition to my role as Associate Director of CALS Global, I also serve as Managing Editor of the report. And our partnerships are really important. So we have 4 of our partners actually here in this fireside chat today, including Eugenia, Eugenia Ciaini, who is the Executive Secretary of Fontagro. So Fontagro is a really unique, sustainable co-financing mechanism that really focuses on the development of agricultural technology and research. So we have Eugenia here this morning to talk about research and development in Latin America, Caribbean, and Spain. So you co-authored actually an article for the 2023 GAP report that really focused on productivity gains and agricultural output in Argentina. So I wondered if you could just start by building on the conversation we just had about R&D and telling us a little bit about your findings from that article.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jess, and thank you very much, Margaret, for organizing this meeting, and thank you, everybody online. So this article that was co-authored with Keith Fugley and Stephen Morgan, it was done 2 years ago. It was a second research that I participated from the first one that I did with Daniel Lema from Inter Argentina. We decided together to start retrieving information that was key to understand how TSP was performing in Argentina. First of all, we did a research about we retrieved information for 120 years. That was the base. And then we started to work with Keith Fugley and Stephen in this second analysis that we done, and we focus especially in trying to understand how public investment affected the TSP. So this is very important because most of the time when we work in agriculture, we always focus on just productivity as a yield measure. I mean, how much we gain from in tons or liters by hectare. But productivity is more than that. It's trying to understand what we are doing when we invest in research and how that research impacts on the total global productivity or efficiencies of the production system. So we found, I think there are 3 very important takeaways from the research. Of course, we need to understand that this research was made taking into account a period of time from 1960 to 2020 and different assumptions that we have to assume because, of course, we don't have all the data. This is one of the first key findings that I will maybe point out later, that we need to be better at getting data in order to understand and measure TSP. But mainly for Argentina, which we all know that is one of the biggest countries in South America, together with Brazil, in producing crops and livestock and exporting the surpluses. The 2% increase that we got in real GDP in that period of time, from 1960 to 2020, was due to 75% to the TSP and 25% for the use of the input. And we measure input as land, labor, and capital, just to globalize everything that the farmer uses, which is, of course, a lot or more than that. So that was the first very important. 75% of the 2% of the increase in the agricultural GDP was due to TSP. And then we tried to estimate the elasticity, research to productivity. We found a 0.4%, which means, talking about elasticity, by 1% increase in public investment in research, we achieve a 0.4% increase in TSP. And we can say, no, this is a small. This is not a small, because when we think in the whole production system, this has a very important impact. So then we went to we tried to analyze the ratio, benefit cost ratio, and we found that is 17:1, which means that we have 17 more time benefits for each cost or 1 unit of cost that we are pursuing. So I think it's very important what happened in Argentina, and actually I was a real witness, because in the 90s I was working in the farm and I saw by myself all the changes that farmers were doing. In the crop system, TSP grow a lot more fast than in livestock. I think in livestock we still have a lot to do. But I discussed it a lot of time with different economists and with Keith, with Stephen. This also is related with market prices and market access. So there is a lot that maybe we still can do to improve prices, market access, value add, and see how we can improve TSP in the whole value chain of the production system.
Wonderful, thank you. I wonder if you might just say a little bit more about the research and development piece and why it's so important in productivity growth, what you saw in Argentina and even in the work that Fontagro does, more broadly in the region.
Yeah, absolutely. In crops, the increase was faster in TSP, and that was due to the genetic modified organisms of plant, the new varieties. That was a huge impact in the whole production system that made farmers to start using and adopting faster those varieties, but also all the technological packages that came with the crops, with the grains. But at the same time, was very interesting, and this is why I always, even though I am Argentine, but I think the Argentine farmers are the more innovative farmers that we have, at least in Latin America. I will not say worldwide, but let me tell you that I have seen it. The farmers don't only include the more modern technologies, especially talking about the crop farmers, but also they started to modify the way they work together. So new organizational models became very important in the country, and that allowed to increase the scale. Seed pools and many other contracts that were mediating between the farmers and the suppliers, and also all these technologies, especially in crops, allow farmers to start producing crops in what we call marginal areas. We are not marginal areas at itself, but it was with areas with some differences, difficulties. So all the crop production system started to move to the northeast and northwest. And I was also a witness of that because I was working on that part of the country too. And at the same time, that changes in crops push a little bit more to ranchers, the livestock production system, to be also more efficient. Because what happened was, in the same farm, if normally farms are mixed, they have crops and livestock, they need to be more efficient in the use of the land, because that became opportunity cost for the farmers. So these are new technologies that started from the public investment, and especially INTA, the National Research Institute. And I will highlight this all the time, because it's very important to keep maintaining and increasing constantly the public investment in research, thanks to the research that INTA did, of course, together with some contract with the private sector. Farmers were allowed to have technologies and adopt the technologies that they needed to follow the evolution of the market. So we have these changes thanks to the investment on public research that became new technology for farmers. The first adopters were the crop farmers. Then the livestock farmers followed them because they understood that in order to increase the scale, they need to adopt technologies and be more efficient. And that became in a whole increase of the TSP for the last 6 decades, but especially after the 90s. And I have more data that I can share later if you want. Thank you, Jess.
Yes, thank you so much. I wonder if you just might briefly build upon that last point you were making of that bridge from research and development to the farmers. So what have you seen that really helps accelerate the distribution of that research and development to producers?
The first answer that I would say is prices. That's the magic word is prices. If we have good prices in the market, farmers are more open to assume new risk. When we are asking farmers to change the way they produce, they are assuming risks. And the 100% of the risk is assumed by the farmer. Nobody shares with him or her that risk. So market access and prices, I think, is the first driver that allow them to include or adopt new technologies. But also, it is not the only one. Sometimes there are some international regulations. For example, I would tell you in the case of livestock, at the beginning of 2000, European Union introduced new regulations in beef and cattle, which was related with animal identification and traceability that impacted in the Argentine livestock sector. And we started to design the new animal identification and traceability system in the country in order to use the quota that we have to export meat to the European Union. So not all the farmers did it, because in Argentina, 80% sometimes, if in average, around 80% of the beef production go to the consumer, domestic consumption, and the rest is exported. So that 20% of the farmers and companies that they need to export, they need to use this new technology. And that track digital technologies, as well as the crop sector, because as much data they have, they are better at taking decisions. So this was a second, regulations can be a second driver on why some farmers can start adopting new technologies. And of course, soil management and different environmental restriction or situation that they may have, and they require to use different or alternative technologies as well.
Wonderful, perfect. That's the perfect transition to Margaret Ziegler, who's the ICA representative in the U.S. Thank you so much for being in this chat this morning. So I think Eugenia teed you up perfectly there, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about ICA's work and why it's so important in building the capacity of governments on the development of the regulatory environment for new technologies.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So ICA has been working for 82 years to help our member states, the ministries of agriculture, to strengthen their technical capacity. And so very much following along those lines that Eugenia mentioned, some of the other member states that we have are very interested in getting more access for the farmers to these innovation technologies that are already adopted in Argentina and some extent Uruguay and Brazil, Chile. But a number of the other member states would like to also use new technologies, but they need help building regulatory capacity. So innovation is important not only in the technologies themselves, but in institutional frameworks, regulatory capacity. So an area that ICA has been helpful in is helping member states develop clear, science-based regulatory frameworks so that their farmers can use and adopt these new technologies. We take it for granted maybe in the US that we have all these frameworks in place. In many countries, the technologies develop so quickly that there is no regulatory framework yet. So our expert at ICA who does a lot of this work is Pedro Rocha. And there's a story in the GAP report about innovation in institutional and regulatory frameworks based on a lot of the work that Pedro Rocha does. And one story I can share is that from Honduras, where a number of farmers want to adopt technologies such as gene editing or biotechnology, but there's no regulatory framework in place. So over the years, at the request of the government, we have come in and helped educate the Ministry of Agriculture and other regulators to provide those clear rules of the road so that farmers can safely use biotechnology. Particularly the example we share in the GAP report discusses how farmers are adopting biotech maize, corn. And this helps them to reduce the amount of pesticide that they use. It increases the yield per plant. They require less labor because they don't have to apply so much pesticide. And for every dollar invested in this biotech maize, the farmers receive $14.70 in return. So it's a really good return. So having the regulatory rules and framework there helps those farmers get access to these tools. And ICA does more of this in other countries as well. So, that's just one example from the GAP report that I could share.
So does the work that you did in Honduras really help to motivate scaling the work that ICA is doing around the regulatory and innovation policy work? How do you kind of take it to new countries that may be less inquisitive or pursuing that agenda on their own?
I think what's beneficial about the work of ICA, because we collaborate with so many countries in this technology and this institutional framework preparation, is countries hear about what other countries are doing, and they want to have better regulatory frameworks. They want to have more training and capacity building. So ICA has a regional program where we, since 2006, we've been holding regional workshops throughout Latin America. These are again led by Pedro Rocha. And about 17 countries and over 80 regulators have participated. So this is the idea of getting the scale, getting every farmer, every tool, building that scale, is the countries gather and the regulators share their own stories and their own challenges. And so it's very much cross-country knowledge sharing. So it's beyond just like one crop. There's a lot of innovation sharing for practices, adoption of things like gene-edited crops that maybe have reduced or improved nutrition. They have the ability to have better taste. There's examples of crops that we're working on there. So the regulators get together, they learn about biosafety, they learn about how to communicate the benefits of these crops and adoption of the crops, and they share practices for improving their regulatory frameworks with one another, and that improves trade also in the region. So countries can use, for example, in the GAP report we mentioned that Honduras had a regulatory framework in place for biotech maize, but Guatemala did not. And so there is trade between the two countries, and in order to analyze what the trade impacts might be of one country having adopted the biotech maize and one not, there was a lot of analysis that needed to be done, and what were the implications of adopting in one country and not the other. So there's an attempt to improve harmonization of those standards for improved trade. And also, ICA provides training in how to communicate about these things with a wider population, not just the regulatory bodies, but also with consumers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And you mentioned some return on investment and improved trade. Are there any other benefits that farmers are seeing as a result of really these harmonized and improved regulatory frameworks?
Yeah, I would just say, I think not only the trade is not only in the crops themselves, but there's also trade in services. So agricultural services for farmers, whether it's through digital technologies or just better knowledge products, those are also impacted by harmonized regulatory frameworks. So they're not only getting access to improved seeds or improved tools, but they're actually able to receive services from other places that maybe they would not have been able to before.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your comments and insight. We're going to bring a brief break to this fireside chat and switch up the agenda a little bit due to scheduling intricacies. So turn it over to Margaret, maybe to introduce Juan Cruz, who needs to depart.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. We're going to come back to the fireside chat shortly. But hello. Saludos, Juan Cruz Molina. We will now have some words from him. He is participating from Argentina. And Horace, if you want to say a few words about Juan Cruz.
Thanks, Margaret. Welcome, Dr. Juan Cruz Molina. Dr. Juan Cruz is the president of Fontagro and also the president of INTA, the Instituto Nacional de Tecnología Agrícola de Argentina. Dr. Juan Cruz, ¿tiene unas palabras?
Do you have something you'd like to share with us? And I know you have to leave rather soon, so you have the floor. All right, thank you very much. It's such a pleasure for me to join you and to participate in the event. Thank you, Margaret. And thank you, Eugenia Saini. She is our leader in Fontagro, and she's shared much about Argentina. So, Jessica, thank you for your questions, and I look forward to meeting you so that we can share more about Argentina. But as Margaret has shared, in the Americas, we have much to learn and to share. As I take the floor, I would like to begin by congratulating Thomas. When I meet you, I'll meet you, Tom. It was fantastic to hear you share and the document, which I believe would really add a value to our different institutions here in the Americas. And to continue with my greetings, I would like to extend my greetings to ICA, the World Bank, and all the partners that participated in the report and in supporting the report. And I know that we are many Argentinians here. I want to greet also Manuel Otero, who along with ICA, Fontagro, Procinorte, and Procisur have been working towards very important goals. And I would like to share a brief presentation where I will perhaps go over things that you have shared with us, Thomas. And could you please let me know if you can see what I'm sharing on screen? Yes. So these are perspectives on sustainable growth of productivity. And Dr. Thompson has shared this with us, that there have been curbs on total production, and that we see those trends are not what we wish to see, and that we have to increase productivity so that our countries can be more prosperous, so that our region can see more prosperity. And I wish to highlight some points. We know that Tom has already shared some of this, but we see that it is necessary that we need to focus on this total factor productivity, and that this is not enough. What we've done so far is not enough. We need to reach nearly 2 percentage points so that we can meet the objectives for sustainable growth. And we see that there are separate sources for growth in the report. This will allow us to improve the design of objectives as we design policies that focus on this sector. We have to focus on policies through science. We need to improve public policies through science. And Fontagro also is working from and through science. We also have to see what are the aspects and that become that roadblock to access and technology. As Thomas said, we need to have more farmers with more tools. And here in the report, we've seen how there have been successful cases. And here I would like to share some successful cases in the Americas that inspire our institutions and all the agricultural institutions and Fontagro. And here, sharing from the Argentinian perspective, here we have those gaps in productivity. And here we're talking about the maize and wheat. And here we can see that they are in very significant gaps. When it comes to maize, we see that the production is 14 tons, and the actual yield is only about 7 per hectare. And when it comes to wheat, then we see that is 3.5 when it comes to yield, and that the potential is 6.7 tons per hectare, which means that those gaps in a yield are nearly 50%. So we can have a 50% increase in yield. And so we must be able to focus on this PFT to ensure that we have appropriate yields. Now, in soy, we see a smaller gap between the yield and the possible production, but we still have much room to grow. And not only to have the best soils, but we see that we can have much improved productivity. We could see the numbers there, and those that we are yielding are much lower. We are having a yield of approximately 5 tons per hectare when we could reach much higher. And as Virginia Tech has shared with us in their report, and as Thomas has already shared, in Argentina, the TFP, as we aim to summarize the report, we see that there is an increase in productivity. But this might be an increase in production that is arising out of improved use of the resources that are available. These are, of course, the soils and inputs. Now, the change in productivity, of course, comes about thanks to two components. We see that there is technological efficiency, which leads us to produce a maximum amount of the crop through the use of resources, and also changes in technology because we see an improved knowledge. And you know all of this, of course, but what I aim to share is what we're doing in Argentina and how we will continue to bolster this. The National Institute of Agriculture in Argentina is working towards these two aspects, an improvement in the two aspects: efficiency through training and technology, and to ensure that there's more information and tools available. And the focus there will be in management, how we will manage what we are already doing. And of course, doing so through science, with changes in technology, through applied research to have new technologies. And these changes also mean that we have to focus on how we implement science. Closing these gaps means that we have to put these tools into action, and that the knowledge is transferred to the decision makers, to the farmers who should have more tools. These numbers reflect what we see in Argentina, and Manuel Lema was mentioned by Eugenia, and the job that the investigation we want to share here, I want to be able to share this throughout the Americas. This is extremely relevant. We see this project that shows these different numbers that has helped us work with these different technologies and methodologies, and will help us foster improved public policies. And now, stepping away from the total factor productivity, both Margaret, Eugenia, and Jessica have brought this up. And here we talk about the importance in research when it comes to science and technology. And in an investigation carried out in research, we see that with an increase of only 10% of the inputs for each peso or dollar spent, we see that we have a benefit, an increase of 3.6%. So we see that there is a return in investment, and we're seeing the results. And so a 10% increase in the inputs can help us improve. And we're therefore improving how we measure this so that we can have the different resources for our institutions. Thus, I want to share a bit with you with Fontagro because beyond being a director of the National Institute for Agricultural Research in Argentina, I also coordinate Fontagro. And Fontagro has a key role in the expansion and adoption of sustainable growth in productivity throughout the region. And we do so through different key strategies. There is a focus in co-financing of strategic projects, and Fontagro is an independent fund that helps to facilitate collaboration and innovation between countries to ensure that we have technologies and practices that are successful can be adopted in other countries. For example, Argentina will learn from Brazil, Brazil from Uruguay, Chile from Uruguay, and we are all learning from each other. Fontagro supports projects that have great potential and impact. We care very much about the impact. We choose the projects because of their excellence, but also because of the impact they might have. Measuring the impact is something we always keep in mind. And this ensures that we have mature technologies that will affect this. And I'm sure at another time, Eugenia will be able to share how we measure the impact and the technology that we have and how it's matured. And we also work to transfer local skills through technology and skills transfer. We ensure that those who lead our institutions and our farmers can work hand in hand. And in closing, as we look towards the future, we know that farmers need more R&D as a driver for growth of the technologies of total factor productivity. Thomas said this several times. We need more R&D, and we need to continue to say the United States needs more R&D. All countries need more R&D. And when we have more research and development, we will continue to grow with those least or less developed countries, such as those in the Caribbean, and we can include them in that network so that we can work with countries in Africa as well. And assistance between public-private sectors is important. I really enjoy that first that slide because we see there are public institutions and private institutions as well. We need to knock down those obstacles that keep farmers from having access to all the proven tools to ensure sustainable growth in agriculture. We need to have more farmers with more tools. To do so, we need to have more networking, more information sharing, and we have to grow our network. Fontagro for over 25 years, has worked to have an environment that fosters collaboration and to work to generate new behaviors. And in this almost last slide, I want to share that in this document, in this report, we can see that we have to close those gaps, not only in production, but knowledge, not only within our countries, but also between our countries. This is how we must work together. We must increase technical efficiency of farmers through training to ensure that they can better manage resources and improve the information shared with them. We have to improve more management skills to ensure that we can have that. We cannot just spread and lands or increase inputs. We have to have better networks. We have to invest in R&D so that we can improve technology. We have to promote regional cooperation and partnerships with the private sector. So the SDG 17 talks about partnerships, and Fontagro is an example of that partnership that is required to meet all the other SDGs. And this is the Fontagro team. We met recently in Ecuador, in the middle of the world, and there we worked. And this is the southern group. This is the S from the south. We were working there, working all together. So thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you very much for your excellent work as you prepared this report. And Fontagro and Argentina are allies to continue to improve the methodology to ensure that we can appropriately measure total factor productivity. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Juan Cruz. And
Thank you very much.
unique and powerful organization. I'm glad we've made the connection with Virginia Tech and Fontagro, and I think the collaboration can only grow across the Americas, because our region really is a global breadbasket and is very important for food security and sustainable production. And Fontagro plays a really important role in driving that research. So thank you for everything you do. Okay, we'll go back to fireside chat. Gracias.
Welcome back to this fireside chat, to come gather around the fire once more. Okay, so Sergio, we've heard a lot from the policy, the R&D. So I think now's a perfect time to come to you. This is Sergio Rivas, who's the CEO of Tanager, which is a global non-governmental organization working with farmers to help adopt technologies as well as into the nutrition and gender space. So tell us what you're seeing from the Latin America region, around the world, about how farmers implement these technologies, what some of those roadblocks maybe are, and some of the enablers as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to ICA and Fontagro for this space. I think it's important to discuss these topics constantly. So from the implementation side, I think we should start by identifying what is the implementation side. Everybody is doing R&D, developing innovations. The private sector is constantly working with their supply chains and whatnot. There is a space for implementing initiatives. There is a space for partners such as Tanager in making these innovations massive and increasing the access and adoption of innovations. We constantly hear that there are buyers looking for reliable suppliers. And on the other side, there are producers that are constantly seeking for stable buyers, right? So where's the disconnect? What we see is that our role as implementing partners, implementing projects, programs, or initiatives, is to be the bridge between these actors, multi-stakeholder actors that are not talking to each other or are distant, in some instances even at odds in the economic space, right? And let me just mention three characteristics. One is, of all the stakeholders in a supply chain, by definition, by design, by mandate even, the implementing partner is the one that has more appetite for risk. We are designed, in fact, we're launched to the real economy to minimize risk for all stakeholders, to take first loss, or to just launch 3 different versions of the same initiative to see what sticks and what really works. So I think that is a special characteristic that we are watching, and I was very happy to hear the examples from Honduras. Honduras is actually the largest footprint that we have in Latin America as implementing partners. And we're watching a lot of this. We work with banks, we work with big off-takers, and we work with research organizations as well. And all of them are ready to jump to action so long as there's a reliable partner that minimizes risk. We thrive in uncertainty. And I think that is a special characteristic that amalgamizes all the will and the efforts that are around this table and around the partnership of the GAP report. The second element is about that interaction with smallholder farmers. That's what we do. We provide the training. We like to say that we unveil their own talents, because we don't teach anything. They have their own talents. They're doing something right. They are resilient themselves. But we unveil their talents. We supply these talents with additional elements that empower people, like connections or financing, or maybe the tools and innovations that are being developed in R&D. However, the adoption of each individual farmer and farmer groups is different. They have their own reactions. A nice story is we were distributing a very cool developed new fertilizer, organic fertilizer in Honduras. And after a few months, we were watching that they were doing something a little bit different. And we started asking, how did this happen? When did this happen? Oh, we've been doing it for 7 months. Why didn't you say something? Because they have their own ways to react. What we do in our role is to bring this feedback and adaptations that farmers are doing themselves to the R&D that is, well developed and so on. But in the massification is the feedback. And we bring this feedback back to the lab, back to R&D. So in a way, you can think of the implementing partner as the voice of the farmers. We give farmers a voice because we are able to aggregate the feedback, analyze it, and translate it to different languages. Banks speak bankese. Researchers speak researchese. And off-takers speak their own language. We are in a position that enables us to translate this feedback, aggregate it, and analyze with robust evidence and bring it back for adaptations in quick action and reverting it back to the field. And the third aspect, I think it was mentioned by Tom and also highlighted by Juan Cruz, collaboration. What elevates our action is our partnerships. Multi-stakeholder partnerships is what we do, is the way we operate. We don't do anything by ourselves. And what we find funny about this is that in every situation, there's insatisfaction with the status quo, right? People are not satisfied with how things are working. And there's always this partner. Sometimes it's the bank. Sometimes we're watching in Honduras also, it's these developers of solar technology. It's a self-assigned role that they say, I'll be the champion of a new initiative. All we need is a reliable partner to launch it. And what we see is that this self-assigned champion roles is where we anchor our efforts. And through that, we mobilize other stakeholders that are more inclined to take action or less inclined to take action. They're more willing to take some risk and whatnot. We call this approach the anchor firm approach. Sometimes it's, in every single case, it's different organizations. But we watch that with careful eyes because it's those champions that will take on the efforts after the implementation partner is off. By definition, again, by design, implementation partners are there for 3-5 years and then off to something else. But the stakeholders, the off-takers, the producers, the farmers are there for the long run. One of our most impactful partnerships is with Mars Wrigley, and they always tell us, we don't think in years, we think in generations. And that's what we rely on. Committed partners such as Bayer, such as Fontagro, such as other partners, who think about the long term and who are committed to taking action to change the status quo.
Thank you. I really love that idea of technical partners or implementing partners really serving as system-wide translators. So maybe could you talk a little bit about how you translate across gender divides? I know this is really important work of Tanager, making sure that women are also having access to these productivity gains and technologies. So what have you seen work? How can you emphasize the importance of the working across gender divides?
Yes, evidently. So the starting point, I think, is the realization that farmer is not a monolithic term. It doesn't define every single individual working in that space. And from there, what we do in our work and in these partnerships with different stakeholders is address the main barriers for this adoption and adaptations to innovations, which are obvious, the kinds of things that we all work on day to day. But we pay attention to a second layer, which are the more nuanced barriers. And these deal perhaps with geographic location, with what is the market intelligence telling us. Like there's signals that horticulture is in high demand in New Orleans, for example, from Central America specifically speaking. Yes, but the nuance is that it's baby carrots that is skewing the data. So we pay attention to the nuanced barriers. But more importantly, going to gender dynamics, we pay attention to a third layer, which is the hidden barriers. And these deal with human behaviors, social norms. How's the decision making happening at the family, at the household? How male and female weigh into, hey, you know what? I need that $1 extra of this new technology that will bring us $14. Is the straight answer yes, immediately? How much of that budget is saved for your daughter's marriage later in the year and so on? So we pay attention to those internal dynamics within the farm, how innovations and technologies affect differently male farmers than female farmers. And we help in adapting and just promoting practices and approaches that help everybody benefit, like every tool for every real farmer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn now to Alejandro Castro, who's the Vice President for International Affairs and Sustainability Strategy at Bayer Crop Science, to hear from the private sector. So could you just maybe start by telling us a little bit about how Bayer is working in the Latin America and Caribbean region, and how you're really focusing on this bringing smallholders along in this productivity journey?
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you also, Margaret, for the kind invitation. This is a topic that it's a total passion for us, and especially for myself, coming from Costa Rica, where I used to see a lot of smallholder farmers. And let me start with that part, because there are 2 billion people that live in more than 500 million small farms. This means that we have a lot of things to do within this smallholder farmer people, that they are the ones responsible on producing more food with less land, with less resources, and doing sustainable practices. So we're asking too much for them. So there is a huge responsibility for us to overcome that challenge and make sure that we work in multi-stakeholder platforms, as Sergio was saying, because I do think that we cannot do this alone. We need to work with different partners to make sure that we deliver and support on their livelihoods. This is why one of our sustainability commitments is actually improving the livelihoods of small farmers. How are we doing this in LATAM? This is very different approach than the one that we have in other areas, because there are different regions, different policies, and I do agree with you, Eugenia, that the Argentinian farmers are great in innovation, totally agree, but they also have a good policy that allows them to have access to some technologies that we don't have in other markets. So this is why we need to adapt what are the things that we need in different countries. So we had an amazing project that was working pretty well in India and other countries of Asia, especially in Indonesia and Bangladesh, and we decided that we wanted that same project working in Latin America, which was Better Life Farming. Better Life Farming, it's an initiative where we are developing entrepreneurs. We put some kiosks in different regions that are underserved regions, where we allow some farmers to become entrepreneurs and help their community to have access to certain inputs. Not only the inputs that we are going to offer to the farm, which are seeds, crop protection, finance tools, but also inland sustainability research or sustainability advice on how to use water, how to keep soil health, etc. But also to connect them to the food value chain to make sure that if they increase their yield, they will be able to put their products in the market. Otherwise, we will contribute into food loss, and that's not what we want. So they were working pretty well, and we wanted to take that initiative that we work with several partners to Latin America. But then we saw that it was a different reality, and the way that we were developing that initiative should change in Latin America. So we find 3 different models in Latin America that we're working with the small farmers. The first model is DK Silos, which is a multi-stakeholder platform initiative. The other model is improving digital tools, and the third model is the way that we are implementing better life farming in LATAM. 2 of those products are highlighted in the gap report, which I'm very happy because we started looking such as the gaps that you were highlighting, how are we going to fit that gaps? Because in Latin America, we started to see what are the needs of the farmers? What do they need to complete in order to fill that gaps? And we find that we can complete some of those gaps, but we needed more people to complete the rest. So first of all, with DK Silos was, how are we going to allow ranchers to become farmers so they can feed their cattle with more nutritious food? So we provided the seed, of course, with corn. We teach them how to do the silage, and then their production start to increase so dramatically that they needed help on the food value chain. Where are we going to put this increase of milk? So we had different partners in this project of DK Silos. For example, in Honduras, we aligned with Sula, who is a milk producer, pretty big in Honduras. And Honduras, why Honduras? Because in Honduras, we have ICA working a lot on policy topics. We have, of course, Zamorano working there on policy topics. So there is a local environment that helps a lot on introducing these new technologies. So in Honduras, we started with this alliance, and it became a growing initiative because everyone saw profitability, because we need to still seek on profitability for farmers. So while they were increasing their milk production, milk had more quality because of the corn that we were providing. So we aligned with Sula, and we also find a way that we can provide funding for these farmers. And then we increased this alliance with Visa, and Visa jointly with Sula provided loans to the farmers so that they continue the business. Then we partnered with IFC because they needed to learn how to manage their finances. Remember that they were building a new business model, and they need to manage that money in order to continue escalating the business. So it was a very successful project. We replied the same project in Costa Rica, for example, with Dos Pinos, who is a huge milk producer, and also in Mexico with Nestle. Of course, we have to find the different partners according to the different countries, and this increases a lot the complexity of working with the smallholders. Then the other project was how we bring digitalization, because we wanted to monitor the cows and how their health was going to improve. So we partner with an entrepreneur, and this is how we match different providers. This entrepreneur is ADA. They provide support with sensors for the cows so that we can measure their health, their productivity, where they are, and we measure some of the factors that will improve the way that we manage that cattle. And we also partner with another software provider to develop a chat, which is called Cultivot, where we are going to provide immediate information on agronomic services to the farm. But there were some underserved regions that didn't have connectivity, and they needed a smartphone, for example. So we partnered with some telecommunications companies, and we approached to some governments to make sure that there was the appropriate infrastructure. And I noticed that in the GAP report, infrastructure is a very important topic that we need to solve. The other project was Better Life Farming, which was putting some kiosks that are increasing each day. Those kiosks are managed by the farmers, by the community. We allow our products to be sold there, and they're also bringing different people. They send money, for example, they receive money from their families that are based in the US, because it's a way that they can go to a place that has connectivity, which is very unique in these regions. So it's working for different purposes. So we saw that this was improving the 3 areas of livelihoods that we were seeking, which is environmental, because we were reducing carbon emissions, of course, with the reduction of land use. We were also improving profitability, so we were helping on the economic well-being, and especially the fact that 40% of the beneficiaries of Better Life Farming are women. That was fantastic as well. And we were also improving their livelihoods in terms of health as well, because we are also partnering with some of our pharma division, providing support on birth control and women health for those entrepreneurs. So that's the way in those three areas that we're approaching to in LATAM. But there is still a lot of things to do, still a lot of gaps to close. Our sustainability commitment is to reach 100 million small farmers by 2030, and we're half our way. So we are always open to more partnerships and learn how can we escalate even more these projects.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I might just ask you to conclude with a thought or two about partnerships. What have you found to be most successful for Bayer? And what would your call to action be for us on partnerships?
Well, the call to action is to stop unconscious bias to the private sector, unconscious bias against the public sector. I think we need to be very open to partner. For me, it's partnering with the Gates Foundation or IFC, for example, or IICA, it's as important as it is to partner with an entrepreneurs. Every single partner is important because it depends on who can close the specific gap. And so we need to listen to everyone. And each time that I receive, for example, a message in LinkedIn or in email, I try to connect with that person because you never know. Actually, I connected Sergio myself in LinkedIn and we are planning some projects. And I think that's the way. It's small steps can bring solutions. So I think we need to be very open and stop unconscious bias on partnering because that's the solution to continue helping the smallholder farmers.
I think that is a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for everyone for your contributions. And I think we now will turn it over. Maybe if we have some time, I know we're running a bit long for questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the excellent round of comments, the fireside chat. Now I would like to invite Mr. Edward Bresnan from the World Bank for his comments on the GAP report and the World Bank approach to agricultural productivity in Latin America. Mr. Bresnan is a senior agricultural economist at the World Bank who has led agriculture and rural sector operations for the bank throughout Latin America, primarily in Brazil and Central America. More recently, he's been focused on India, on smallholder dairy development, climate change, climate smart agriculture, and agricultural higher education. Mr. Bresnan, you have the floor. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And actually, that might be a little old, but more recently, I'm actually focused on Southern Cone and, of course, in Latin America. So all of this discussion is quite timely. Thanks. And I appreciate Margaret, Ika, and everyone else for inviting me to this. It's never easy to be one of the last people in a discussion, so I'll try and be brief, but it's great to hear at the very end. I think Eugenia, Alejandra, and Sergio, you all mentioned partnerships, and Juan Cruz did as well. This is key. This is not something that's going to be solved, the productivity gap, through public sector interventions alone. In fact, the Ag 6 system transformation really needs an investment of about $280 billion annually, globally. And fiscal constraints being what they are, it's unlikely that's coming from the public sector. And in most cases doesn't, because private investment and innovation have driven productivity growth over time as well. So contextualizing that, I think, is part of the big picture. It was very refreshing to hear towards the end, Sergio and Alejandra both as well mentioned smallholders. Because a lot of the graphs we saw look at the sector as a whole, but in Latin America, my short story is about 75% of the producers are on 25% of the arable land, and the other 25% of producers are on about 75% of the land. They face different technological sets, different constraints to effective adoption of technology, and all of that constrains their yield growth and their productivity growth. So differentiated sort of target markets require differentiated solutions. We focus at the World Bank typically on smallholder farmers, but I will add that our mission globally is eliminating extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity on a livable planet. And that livable planet includes all agriculture, including crops and livestock. So our mandate is actually trying to see how we can move productivity forward, increasing resilience, and doing this with a decreased carbon footprint, because in Latin America, GHG emissions, 26% of them are coming from the ag sector, and a huge portion of that's coming from livestock, enteric emissions, et cetera. And that's preaching to the choir. Everyone around the table and around the video conference understands that. What are some of the tools we use in Latin America through our operations? We've got over 20 operations throughout the region. It's about $2 billion of investment currently, commitments to the World Bank, focused both on crops and on livestock. I'll just give you a few ideas. So I think Honduras has been mentioned. We have a large and growing portfolio in Brazil. One of the models we follow more increasingly are productive alliances. What are these productive alliances? We bring together technical partners, those who have practices and investments in on-farm tools and equipment that can change farmers' production patterns, open up new markets. We have financial partners that are part of these alliances, banks, savings and loan cooperatives, farmer organizations. We find that working with organizations is a great force multiplier, both for crowding in technological change and also bringing scale to the small scale that permits farmers greater access to markets, both domestic and possibly external markets. One thing to keep in mind is small scale farming, family farming, is responsible for about 50%, in some cases higher, of domestic food production. Small-scale farmers in the northeast of Brazil, for example, are responsible for 90% of goat and sheep production throughout the country, and most of that is consumed domestically. So where we can bring greater productivity to these small-scale farmers, that also will have an impact on local production, local markets, and also stave off what, in some cases, are imports coming in from outside of the country. How do we do all of this? I mean, there was a focus also on innovation. I don't think we can abandon, and in fact, we obviously, as the report is showing, we need to ramp up research and innovation and research and development expenditures at the public level to drive changes that are country specific, but also greater partnerships with the private sector. I mean, I'm encouraged to see the title of the upcoming GAP report, scaling up pilots, because that's exactly what we found to be quite successful, whether it's market-based access to land, or a greater adoption of irrigation by farmers that time shifts and spatially shifts water and opens up greater opportunities for windows for both domestic and export markets and new cropping patterns. How to get this to farmers most effectively? Lead farmers are a great way of doing that, demonstration plots. Some of this can be financed through farmers themselves and their organizations, but de-risking these investments so that farmers test them out and find that they are successful in raising their productivity and their incomes is extremely important. I'll mention one other activity that we're working on right now in Uruguay. They're scaling up a small pilot they had in the livestock sector, which actually generated across a small group of farmers, about 60, increased net income, increased beef productivity, and significant reduction in their methane emissions. And that feeds directly into their ability to meet their nationally determined goals through the Paris Accord. And in fact, we recently tied a loan to Uruguay, a policy development loan of $350 million, to essentially an interest rate rebate on greater ambition when it comes to methane intensity reduction. And the efforts that they are taking on now, and what we are partnering with them on, will have an impact on their ability to meet this greater ambition on their nationally determined contributions. And it will have an impact on their bottom line in terms of their financing with us. So there's a lot of innovation out there, and 10 minutes is probably not enough time, and definitely not enough time to share them all. But that said, I've enjoyed the discussion. I've enjoyed the presentation. One thing I would suggest that in the future, it's a tall order perhaps, but given the the number of small scale holders and family farmers we have in Latin America and globally. And I think Alejandra mentioned this. A challenge in the GAP report going forward is to see if you can disaggregate this in some meaningful way, because I think looking at these two sectors also can give us a path forward and how the path towards greater productivity is different for both large scale and small scale farmers. Okay, with that, I will wrap it up and thank you very much. I've enjoyed it, and best success to everyone connected and all you all in the room there. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Margaret?
Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't have as much time as we hoped for questions, but this was really a great interchange. This is the first time we've done a presentation like this. We know the GAP report launches, but we like to dig more deeply into it as a America's region. So we'll propose something like this next year after the GAP report 2024 is launched. We'll do a deeper dive. Thank you, Ed. I know you've always been a champion of the GAP report there at the World Bank and promoting the concept of total factor productivity. We appreciate your helping us with that, and I'm really excited to hear about this this approach in Uruguay. I want to follow up with you on that for a number of reasons on the climate change issues and the NDCs in Uruguay. So just to again wrap up, thank you to everybody who's been here, who came in the room, all of those online. Thank you for staying with us. And please again register for the upcoming launch of the 2024 report on October 3rd. And we will share much more with you soon. Thank you to the GAP team who came in from Virginia Tech. And those of you on this panel, thank you very much. We will now break. We have a little coffee and food still left. So those of you here, please join us for more conversation if you have time. Thank you, everyone online. Thank you.